I'm coming up on the 1 year anniversary of my dad's passing, and feel like it's now or never to start talking about it a lot more. And also, I think it'll probably help me process a few more things. So, that's why I wanted to do this episode. My dad was a person who was very much full of life, the life of the party, if you will. Always fun, always happy, smiling with such a big laugh and a huge personality. And as I watched and helped my mom care for him, and I do mean like hospital bed in our living room, oxygen machine, turning them to get him to get clothes on and whatnot. It was a complete 180 from the man I knew. Now, yes, he was still able to talk. He was very cognizant. He could hear. None of those things were wrong. He still had his sense of humor. But in a short amount of time, and I'll say maybe like 2 weeks, he went from being able to walk to not being able to walk anymore. And for somebody who was about 250 pounds, 6'5", that was a lot to deal with. It was also a lot of person to turn when we needed to get things done. But that's beside the point. And stop me if I'm rambling. I know you can't stop me. Watching someone you love decline in health is stressful, it's difficult, it's hurtful, and it kind of leaves you with a sense of helplessness because you know that despite your best efforts to keep them comfortable, get them whatever they need, continue to do their medication, sit with them, anything that they need, that it is ultimately not going to be enough because the end result is going to be their transition. But you still do it anyways. It's kind of like it's a little bit of the reversal of when we're born. When we're born, we're very active, but we can't talk. We rely on our parents for everything, to clothe us, feed us, comfort us, protect us, bring us joy, laughter, all of those things, to care for us. It's the same thing when you are caring for someone who is extremely ill. They are also relying on you to clothe them, feed them, keep them mobile. Maybe their circulation needs to be moving, so they have physical therapy or medications to take or requests or things that you want to suggest that they might enjoy. And that's great. Except the end result is you're never going to be able to stop this person from transitioning, just like our parents cannot stop us from growing up and moving on and continuing on with our lives. I say all of that because in taking care of my dad, along with my mom, and visiting him in the hospital when that time came, you try not to think about it even though you know it's inevitable. But there comes a point where you know that you are doing the things that you are doing simply for yourself and not for the person. And what I mean by that is, no matter how much conversation you have, no matter how many Jell-O cups you give them, you are still caring for someone that is going to stop eating, Stop talking, stop moving. Bear with me because this is the first time I've actually ever talked about this out loud. I remember taking calls with my mom and my dad in the hospital, and we'd be talking to the doctors about what his next point of care would be. And one of the multiple times that he was in the hospital, and one of his doctors kind of said, I guess got tired of seeing my dad there or whatever, and was like, there's just nothing else we can do. And it kind of made my dad's sense of self and purpose kind of drop to the floor, because this is a doctor that he had relied on for a decade, who pretty much was saying, I'm just going to give up on you. There's nothing else I can do. I can't help you, and I'm tired of this. And I know that had to hurt, because nobody wants to be given up on, especially when they're trying their best. I remember one of the times where they had optioned him some options, medical options, medications, and things like that he could take to help ease his breathing, so to let him breathe a little bit better and easier, because at this point, I think his lung capacity was now at about 15-20%. And his heart capacity, I believe, was probably also at about 15%. So, those numbers were shocking to me, because the last I knew, his lung capacity was a lot more than that, and his heart capacity was about 40%. So imagine thinking it was 40 and going down to about 15-20%. To me, it felt like he was slowly choking to death, almost, with that in the lung capacity. Anyways, there was an option for him to do a medication that would help him breathe better, make this easier for him. The doctors explained it to him. We're all saying, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. And this was the moment where my dad broke my heart, because this is the moment where he stood up and said he was done with this. He didn't want any more medication. He didn't want to do this anymore. He said, I just want to die. And to hear those words come from someone you love very much, who you are fighting to get the answers and the help for, and to hear them subsequently say something like that, it makes you feel like I think to hear them pretty much give up is crushing. Because you know what it means. They don't want you to do anything else. They want to go. They want to leave. He said this because he was like, I don't want to be a burden to my family anymore. I don't want to put them through this. I just don't want to do any of this anymore. I'm tired. I just want to die. And it kind of lingered in the air like that. We all said, okay, the doctors agreed that they would not go forward, because ultimately, him being the patient, it was his decision. We could not weigh in and make him get the medication, because he's obviously cognizant and of sound mind. And so that is what happened. They said, okay, we won't give you the medication. That was it. And once they left the room, it was kind of a little bit of silence there with my mom, myself, and my brother. And the call ended shortly after that. And I remember going into my living room and bursting into tears. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that their family member, their parent, wants to just end it, quit, give up, do all those things, because that's what it sounded like to me. But I needed to understand what he had been going through all these months, all these years, all the pain that he had gone through, all the difficulty it was. And also kind of over time, just losing who you are. You are not able to care for yourself in the way that you should. You've lost your mobility. You can't eat the food you want anymore. The pain keeps coming. It's harder and harder every day to breathe and to just keep your spirits up. And additionally, he did not want us to continue to wait on him hand and foot or do any of those things, which we never complained about and we never were going to. We had always been there to help with anything, get the things we needed to get, and always assist him in those moments. And I think from a patient perspective, you don't want your family members and your loved ones to spend their lives caring for you, especially like that. So that was the decision he made. I had a full meltdown after the phone call ended. And I realized it was heartbreaking to hear the man that I saw as such a big giant and a full of life person say that they don't want to live anymore. It's hard to accept. It's hard to deal with. But a lot of patients feel like that. A lot of people who are in these situations with these ailments do feel that way. And it's hard for the family to hear. And we want to keep pushing and pressing and no, do this. But we honestly can't. In our situation, we did. After my dad had made the decision not to have the medication, my mom pretty much reprimanded him and said, no, you're going to get this. She was forceful, very direct. And it was something that my brother, her, and I wanted for him and wanted him to do. So essentially, we kind of made him. And he agreed. And he did it for a few days. And then he told the doctors to stop. And when they told us, we knew. We just had to let it go. This was his decision. And it's really hard to accept when the patient makes a very distinct and serious decision like that. And could be anything. When someone doesn't want to continue chemo, or they don't want to take options for new surgeries, or go through another round of something, or want to stop the medication that could help them for a little while longer, but won't preserve them. It's hard, but we have to accept their wishes, because we're really just doing it for ourselves. Because if they know that they're tired and they're ready to go, and they know better than we do the pain, the suffering, the anguish, the guilt, the fear, the acceptance that they have already gone through, we wouldn't push so hard. But we do because we love them. So for the last month leading up to my dad's transition, he was in the hospital. Um, and that was because his breathing was not where it should be. And like all the other times, he needed to go back to the hospital. But they knew, sorry, they knew that he had been there before in the reasoning. So they admitted him, put him in a room. And this was just where we were going to be for the long haul. I will, um, it was kind of like go mode at this point. You know, you're like, okay, we're going to the hospital. Hopefully, he'll be able to come home again. We're not really sure. We got to keep everything moving smoothly and just, you're going through the motions. You're driving there every day. You're seeing them. You're staying until the evening and then you're leaving, coming home, getting up, going back the next day and the next day and the next day. I will say that during this time, because I knew that I wasn't going to remember everything that was happening, I started a diary, a dad diary. I wanted to write down everything that had happened that day with him, any notes that I needed to take, things that he mentioned or people he wanted to call, and just also monitor kind of like his condition, to see if it was getting worse or not. And what I found is that actually was a really good way to kind of just remember, because everything, there's so many things that are happening and so many little things that are going on, and things that you will not remember in the moment, or even the next day, because the next day comes with its own new set of whatever is happening. Um, so it was actually a really good idea to keep that diary. Um, and I'm really glad I did, because when I look back, I have some really good notes in there. Um, Someone who is in their declining stages of life, they do start to exhibit, different symptoms where they're not as hungry or they can't chew or swallow as well. Some people might end up having a feeding tube if that's, the route that needs to happen. But there's one thing that everyone will always do until the very end, and that is hear. And I looked this up. You may lose a lot of your functions and faculties, and the person may even lose their sight, but you will always be able to hear until the very end. So, knowing that, I decided that I was going to play his favorite music every single day. My dad was a big jazz fan and also into classical music. And also, obviously, him living in New York back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, he obviously ran into a lot of jazz greats in his line of work, hung out with a few of them, were friends with some of them. So he had a lot of favorites. So there was plenty of music to play. So my dad, so my dad being a big jazz fan, I played jazz music pretty much every day that I was there. I had my work laptop. I was doing work. My mom would be reading. We'd be watching TV. If he wanted to see something while he was still interested in that, sure, we would all do that. Eventually, over time, as the days kept moving and the weeks kept moving, my dad had less conversation. His memory and cognitive functions began to change a little bit, and by that I will say that some days I would come in and he would say, "I think they're trying to put something in my food," or the long running one was he was always looking for his pants. I was like, "They took my pants. I don't know where they took them. I need my pants so I can get out of here." And we're like, wait, where are you going? Where are you going? He was like, no, 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 I'm ready to go. Like, I'm done. I want my pants. So somebody please give me my pants. That was one of the longest conversations ever, was trying to tell him, we have to stay a little longer. I think they took your pants to the cleaners. I'll go see if I can find them. He was always very concerned about his pants, but he knew that he needed his pants to go, and he didn't have them. So that became kind of a running thing almost every day. It did start to get a little hazy when he did think that they were trying to put something in his food. Somebody was taking a knife and packing different things into other people. Things that just start to be like you're talking out of your head. And as that started to happen, where things got a little more confusing, you just kind of move on because you know this isn't normal. This isn't who this person usually is. But you keep moving forward. So the morning of my dad's transition, I got up early and made coffee downstairs. And I remember the phone ringing. My mom answered it. And I didn't pay much attention to it, really. Just like, let's kind of just breathe in, breathe out. Because I think 2 or 3 days before, I said I just can't go to the hospital another day. I just need to take some time. So we didn't go. But then we went back the next day and the next day, and then we're up to this day. I remember my mom coming downstairs and coming over to me and saying that he was gone. And I looked at her like I didn't understand, because I didn't. She repeated it, and I still didn't understand. It wasn't getting in. It wasn't getting through. After about a few minutes, she hung up the phone to tell them that we were on our way, and I lost it. Big time. I started screaming and crying. And I remember saying, but we were coming back. We were coming back. We were coming back. And the reason why is because I never wanted my dad to be alone. I was always afraid whenever we left the hospital in the evening time that we wouldn't make it back the next day before he had passed away. And sadly, that's what happened. And I remember saying, but we were coming back. I promise we were coming back. We were coming back. It was all that I could say. I just felt crazy. And I felt sad that I wasn't there. But I realized later on that it was probably for the best. Because I don't think I would have been able to handle watching the final breaths of his life and the departure. And he always wanted to do things his way anyways. So I think he kind of did what he wanted to do. He wanted to go when we were not there. So he got what he wanted. Parents always get what they want. Eventually. Okay. Going through the grief process and losing a parent is almost indescribable. And for most of us, we'll probably do it twice. So, and I say that because during the process of, me caring for my dad and, seeing his last months and weeks and days, I had friends, reaching out to me saying, hey, just if you want to talk, you want to do this. And fortunately, and also unfortunately, I have several amazing girlfriends who have unfortunately experienced the loss of a parent, specifically the loss of their dad, before now. So I had pretty good references and encouraging words and guidance from them of kind of their experiences, how they felt, what was going on with them. But they would always give me the asterisk of, it's different for everyone. And it is. It's always going to be different for everyone. Everybody has different relationships with their parents, and every father-daughter relationship or whatever father, daughter parental figure, or, what kid parent relationship is going to be different. So everybody deals with their own things. It doesn't make it any easier whether you are totally a daddy's girl or barely talking to them. The loss is still the loss. When everything happened, I pretty much went into work mode. There were plans to make, arrangements, notifications. The business of death had to happen. Scheduling services, calling banks, doing the will stuff, blah, 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 on and on and on and on and on. When all of that dies down and everything kind of gets a little bit quiet, people are checking in on you. You're still kind of in a state of disbelief and shock, or at least I was. I do remember even up to the day of the funeral, none of it seemed very real. It seemed like he had just gone to the store, or he was just on a trip away from the house and would be back soon. I remember sitting in the living room, in my parents' living room, and thinking that any moment I would hear his keys jingling in the door and he would be coming in. But it didn't happen. And I knew that it wouldn't happen, but I also knew that it could happen still, because my mind hadn't caught up with the reality of what was happening, if that makes sense. I could hear his voice still in my mind. You can still smell the scent of their clothes and their cologne on things they wore, where they sat, or, whatever, depending. And you're just kind of moving, not really acknowledging. You have things to do, you have things to get through. But for me, I wasn't breaking down and crying because I knew I had other stuff to do. And I needed to be there for my mom, and I needed to be there to answer questions, and we needed to plan this whole thing. And I will say that in this time, I realized that I needed to be more of a support for my mom than anything. So it didn't matter how I felt. I wanted to be there for her because she had just lost her partner of 40 plus years. And how do you get through that after you've taken care of them and watched them decline and all of these things? But I knew my mom is a woman. I know she's a woman of faith. I know that she can handle it. But again, this is a first time for everybody. Even though I had, really good notes from my friends, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. And you cannot prepare for this. I will say that. Even though you think you can prepare and you're like, okay, I get it. I know what's going to happen and X, Y, and Z needs to happen. I'm going to cry. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it all out. I had a plan. I know, crazy enough, I was like, I don't want to be one of those people that pushes my grief to the back. I want to just go ahead and feel the feelings already. I want to get through it. I want to, do the crying. I don't want to, push it all down and jump into my work and like, totally avoid it. And then like when I'm somewhere super public and everybody's having a good time, I burst out into tears and start crying and breaking down in some club and then have to go home and it winds up on TMZ. Gosh, no. I was going to do it all right then. Little problem with that, doesn't work that way. Not at all. Grief is not linear. And I know that people have probably told you that, but let me reiterate, grief is not linear, okay? It does not go, oh, no, 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 no. It goes, da, 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 da. Oh, pause. Yeah, it's all over the place. It is one of the craziest things, and also explainable but unexplainable at the same time, which is probably why you're not really following me right here. But anyways, let's move forward. I spent some time at home with my mom, but when it was time for me to return to my own lovely home, I was like, okay, I have to go back. I'm going to be by myself. I know I have to take the time, move slowly, just feel the feelings, get it all out, do all the things. And I wasn't sure how it was really going to fare being back in my own space, in my own home, without my mom and my brother and all of that. But I boarded the plane, I got back safely, I got to my apartment, and shortly after I got back, probably like the second day, I realized that the Bree that left that apartment before was not the Bree that returned to the apartment.